Hello, everyone, and welcome to the morning session of our 2020 Educators Ag Institute virtual this morning. We are learning about the Penn State Flower Trials. So first, we would like to thank our sponsors that you can see on the screen. They really help to make this session and all the others possible. We have some housekeeping. If you have not completed the pretest, we will put the pretest link in the chat box. We would love if you could complete that. It helps us to know how well you're learning everything and how effective we are being. If you complete the pretest, the post-test, and attend this and other sessions, you get your name entered into this jar to win a $50 gift card to either the National Ag in the Classroom or the American Farm Bureau Federation online store. So you can get one name per session. So you can get some really cool resources from those stores. Just a reminder, the chat box is public, so please be respectful of what you say. If you want to say something to everyone, so all the attendees see it, please make sure the to says to panelists and attendees. That makes sure we're sharing our ideas to everyone. There's also a Q&A button. If you would like to ask our presenter a question, type it in there and we will answer as many questions as we can. Alyssa will be doing a lot of questions and answers later today. So this morning, we will be joined by Dr. Alyssa Collins from the Penn State Flower Trials. But first, we would like to share a little activity that you might do that's kind of based on the flower trials themselves, something you can bring into the classroom. So this activity is called Let Us Explore Plant Varieties. It's adapted from a kidsgardening.org lesson plan. And in it, you can grow multiple plants of different varieties of lettuce, kind of like they do for flowers at the flower trial. So you can pick a couple different kinds. Maybe you have some bib lettuce, black-seeded Simpson, romaine. Pick some fast-growing varieties. And then you can have your students kind of guess and determine where in your classroom they want to put those plants as they're growing. So you could choose a windowsill, a closet, a grow light, a teacher's desk, and make them guess, how will the plants grow? How will they taste based on their variety and on their location? As the plants grow, you can collect data over the length of their growing period. You can have them convert to metric, create graphs, all kinds of different math lessons that you can incorporate into that. So then afterwards, we can compare the varieties based on growth. So as we said, have them convert different things, and then you can measure over weeks and see which one is the fastest. Which ones grew closest to what you expected? How was variety in that? How did the location play into their success? And did you meet the plant's needs? How did that lettuce in the closet grow compared to the one on the windowsill? So you can adapt it for different ages. Also, you can compare based on taste. Different varieties of lettuce have different tastes. So just like different flowers have different uses based on their own characteristics, you can harvest them, have the students compare them based on crispness. Are they bitter? What's the overall taste? You can rate them on a poor, better, best scale, or you can use numbers and make it numerical data. Then you can teach them averages, mean, median, mode. If you want to extend, you can also talk about nutrition and see how they all compare and choose which is the best lettuce. Kind of like how Dr. Collins and her team learn about different plant varieties and which flowers are the best. So now we will move over to learn a bit about the Penn State Flower Trials. So Dr. Collins has created a video, and this will introduce us to the Penn State Variety Trials.
Welcome to a virtual tour of the Penn State Flower Variety Trials. I'm Melissa Collins, the Director of the Southeast Agricultural Research and Extension Center and an Associate Professor in Plant Pathology at Penn State. The Southeast Ag Research and Extension Center is a Penn State research farm located in Lancaster County. The center is part of the larger Pennsylvania Agricultural Experiment Station. We have sister farms in Bicolorville, Adams County, where they study tree fruit, and in Erie County, where they focus on grape production. Penn State also has a large agricultural research facility just outside State College, which we call the Russell Larson Agricultural Research Center, or Rock Springs. Our job at CREC is to take the best ideas out of labs and experimental greenhouses and put them to test in the field to find out if they'll work for farmers and gardeners. Our motto is, we kill plants so you don't have to. And basically, we try to get crazy things that farmers wouldn't have the time or the resources or the scientific background to do. Then the results of this work are shared with everyone through articles, fact sheets, and extension programs. In a typical year, we normally would host about 30 events for many different kinds of audiences. One of our major projects is the Penn State Flower Trials, one of the largest flower trials in the country. We trial all kinds of annual bedding plants and more recently have introduced herbaceous perennials. These trials actually started in the 1930s in State College on the site that is now the law school. In the 1990s, they were brought down here to CREC by this extension educator, Alan Michael, who was the first trial director here. When he retired in 2013, I took over as trial director for a while before we hired his successor and current director, Sinclair Adam, who is our trials director today. Having the trials here in Mannheim works for many reasons. Here in the heart of Pennsylvania's breadbasket, they're easier to get to for most growers, and our growing conditions are really similar to those of about 60% of the consumers in America. If a plant can do well here, you can sell a lot of it nationwide. So how do we get the flowers that make up this trial? Well, we invite entries from plant breeders and flower companies all over the world, and they send us their plants and pay us to evaluate them. You might recognize some of the names here, like Ball or Proven Winners. So we start receiving plants as these little plugs in March, usually about 20 plants per variety. We keep close track of them as they arrive so nothing gets confused or lost because we're ultimately dealing with nearly 1,000 varieties a year. Some arrive neatly labeled and in great shape, others not so much, and sometimes mistakes are made. Here we have a plant that came in clearly mislabeled. Our shiny, clean, sterilized greenhouse begins to fill up as we pot these little plugs up into 4-inch pots. And we care for them for a few months while they develop good, strong root balls. Each tray gets a tracking number that's unique to that variety. And by May, we're bursting at the seams with plants. So this whole process starts late February, and these will finally be ready to plant outside after the risk of frost is over in late May. Then comes the fun part. In about 3 days, we transplant about 9,000 of these plants into the big 12-inch buckets that they'll live in for their summer outside. It takes a whole army of well-organized volunteers to do it, and they come from both our Penn State Master Gardener program and from the floriculture industry, those professionals who generously volunteer their time. This place is crawling with volunteers for about a week at that time, and it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun too. But there's a core group of master gardeners that are so committed. You'll find them washing pots in January, weeding in April through September, and then composting the spent plants in October. So we really are appreciative of these guys. What's in it for them? Well, satisfaction, but also free plants. These are like gold to master gardeners. This is the stuff that really no one else can get, experimental plants and plants that are not really that common in our area. So they just really go wild for these. And we'd like to be able to pay them off at least a little bit. And by June, we have a complete flower trial that anyone can come and see. We typically have trial maps and information in a welcome center just as you pull in. Unfortunately, there's no visitors this year, but we'll be back to welcoming visitors as soon as we can safely do that. So we care for and watch these plants all season, and they get rated for performance about 3 to 4 times. The pink flags here represent plants that did well in first rating, which is usually in June. Those that still look great by August are real winners. So in this picture, you'll see this pentas here, which is still looking very excellent, and it has one of these pink flags, which means it was looking good at its very first rating. So you know this is a good plant that you would happily choose if you were going to grow it for retail or if you were going to buy it as a consumer. We also have a section just for shade plants like coleus and impatiens and anything else that's popular that year. And each year we welcome hundreds of visitors from all over the world. Some are flower breeders or salespeople who want to see how their varieties performed against the other guys' stuff. Some are greenhouse growers or garden center retailers who will use the performance in the field of these flowers to choose what they want to grow next year. And some are home gardeners who just want to see some cool flowers or get some ideas for their own gardens. Many times folks will see something like they like in the trials and they'll ask us where they can buy it. We really don't have that kind of information. We don't get a list of who sells what, but consumers should definitely ask their local garden center if they carry the plant that they're interested in. If the center doesn't have it, they'll at least make a note of what their customers want, and if enough ask for it, they'll definitely grow it in the future. This is how they make some of the decisions that they make in the winter when they decide what to grow for you when you want to buy them in the summer. Over the years, we've done a lot of events in the flower trials, and we try and gear them toward not only industry professionals, but landscapers, school groups, people who might want to use the flower trials in different ways. And so we encourage anyone who's interested in the flower trials to come out and visit them anytime. They're open in a normal year from dawn till dusk, every day, June, July, and August. Each year we get different varieties, and one year we might get a whole bunch of petunias, whereas the next year we'll get fewer and we'll get a whole bunch of some other variety. And this just kind of mirrors what's going on in the industry. It's kind of exciting to see what's new and different. You'll see we trial 3 pots of each variety, and we put 3 plants in each of these pots. This way we get a sense of how well a variety performs uniformly. So if one plant dies, it could just be a fluke. If they all die of all those 3 pots, well, then maybe that variety is just not really well suited to growing in our conditions. And this is important information for people who want to have successful plants in our region. So you'll see here we have this millet, which is a nice ornamental grass, and that's doing really, really well. This papyrus next to it, also doing great. But there's some lobelia right here next to both of those that we know from the flag did really well in that first rating, but now at the end of the season, they're just all kind of brown and dead. And they just don't really do well in our really hot, humid conditions here in the Northeast. Anyone can view the results of the flower trial at our website. And this is how many flower companies who may not be able to visit can use our trial. You can go to this website or just Google us and click trial results. When you do that, you'll see our results, and we have results from the past 3 years posted. So let's check out this variety of Angelonia called Alonia Bicolor Violet. We'll click on it and we can see several different types of pictures. So we've got the 3-pop picture and we've got close-ups. And we'll see also a lot of information about it and each of 4 ratings in 2018. You could spend hours on the site just poring over this information, and many growers do just that in the winter. And I invite you to check this out for yourself and for your students to see if you might be able to use any of this information for your classes or just to play with the data. Once everyone can go places again, you should know that you can also visit a subset of the Penn State Flower Trials planted in the ground instead of in pots at Hershey Gardens, Ag Progress Days, which is at our research farm in Center County, and also at North Park just outside Pittsburgh. And if you're on Instagram, definitely follow us there. The flowers are very photogenic, and so that's a fun follow. And finally, if you know any students who might be interested in an internship with the flowers or in any of our horticulture or agronomy projects, please do tell them about us. We hire up to 6 students, give or take, each year, and they can be at any college or university. They don't just have to be from Penn State. They do need to be over 18 and matriculated in an undergraduate program. But we start searching for these positions in January or February, and we're always looking for great candidates who are interested not only in getting paid for a summer job, but also learning a few things about how research is done and how agriculture gets done. So now we're going to take you live to a Q&A session direct from the flower trials. But before we do that, feel free to capture my information here if you ever need to get in touch with me or the other researchers that do work here. Email is the best way to reach me since I'm in the field quite a bit. But either way, thanks so much for joining me today, and I'm really glad I got the chance to introduce these flower trials to you. And I hope you can continue to join me in the field now, and we'll do a little bit more touring and answer some questions.
Okay, and now we will move over to Dr. Collins in the field.
Hi, everyone. So welcome to the flower trials. We're here live this morning, and luckily it's a relatively nicer morning than we've had over the last couple of days. But I've actually got a bunch of people out here to introduce you to, who are the people who actually run the flower trials. And I'm going to bring them over and they can say hi, and we can all help answer some questions that you guys might have. Come on in.
Good morning, everybody.
This is Sinclair Adam, and he is the flower trial director. You saw a picture of him earlier, but now you see the real thing. And he's been with us since 2013 and is responsible for bringing perennials into our program, which we never had before, at least in the ground. Next, we have Crystal Snyder. She's an extension educator out of Northampton County, but she's got a long history in the flower industry. And so she brought to us a whole bunch of expertise in plant nutrition, which was great and has really helped us a lot. Next, Nick Flax. And
Hey,
Nick
everyone.
Flax is the most recent addition to our flower trials crew and floriculture at Penn State in general. And he is based out of Montgomery County.
No, Bucks
County. My bad. He lives in Maryland though, so he gets around.
Yeah.
But he's been
It's a hike.
kind of coordinating our digital presence now on the web, and they're actually out here taking additional footage today. So we've got these three folks, and then let me also introduce you to our current interns. Hi everyone, this is Lydia Williams, and she's actually in her second year of interning with us, and so she's kind of our senior intern who is helping teach all the other interns and bring her knowledge of what last year used to look like, which was really different, and translating that into what this year has to look like for our trials. And with her, we also have Carrie Martin, and she is our newest intern and joined us this summer, and she's from Millersville. And Lydia is actually from Penn State Harrisburg, but she's graduated now, so she's ready to move on in life if anyone knows of any positions that might be a good fit. So at this point, I'm going to ask if anyone has any questions or would like to see anything in particular that we could show you. Right here, we're in our hoop house where we have a lot of combination hanging baskets, and people really like those. And we also have their partners on the ground there. But I can actually detach and go anywhere in the flower trial we would like to go to get your questions answered.
If anyone has any questions, you can type those in the Q&A. So, oh, okay. So Alyssa, how many plants are at the trial?
So we have anywhere from 700 entries all the way up to over 1,000 entries any given year. And so that's the number of entries. But remember, we multiply that by 3 because we do 3 pots of each. And then within each of those pots, we also have 3 individual plants. So ultimately, we have, you know, what, like 9,000 plants? Yeah. So 9,000 plants are potentially what we have. And we actually have the room to expand or reduce the numbers that we have. In fact, this year, because we did have limited staffing and we had limited time to get all this done, we reduced the number of plants we planted. So we only have 2 pots per each variety this year instead of 3, just so that we could get it all done. And the work that normally takes master gardeners, you know, less than a week to do of this potting, it took us about a month this year because it was only a very limited staff that could do it, but they got it done. And not all of the flower trials across the country this year went ahead and ran, but we were able to because of that.
Very cool. So are the plants grown to be pest and or disease resistant?
Great question. So we basically get whatever the industry is interested in trialing. And I like to say we don't grow them quite as nicely as a breeder would, because a breeder would, you know, spoon feed them nutrients, make sure they have all the sprays to protect them from everything. We don't baby them like that, but we also don't treat them quite as bad as your average homeowner. Because, you know, a lot of people tend to buy a plant, put it on their deck and ignore it for the rest of the year and hope it lives. We do feed them regularly on a very regular basis. We tissue test and we soil test to make sure the nutrients are within the range that they want. And then if we do have any pest or disease issues that show up, we can go ahead and spray those with a fungicide or insecticide as needed. We try and go with softer chemistries when we can because we do have bees around. So we do pay attention to that, but we're not willing to let any one group of plants fail because we still need something to rate. And we don't get to do that and we don't get to produce the science unless we have a plant there that survives.
Makes sense. So what do you use? Do you use any kind of plant nutrients or special soil components
Ooh,
to care for them?
where's Crystal? come on over. I'll start talking about this. But Crystal is our nutrient specialist. We do have a special blend of potting media that's made custom for us by Fry Brothers, which is a company who does custom blends and potting mix for anyone, but they do it bulk for greenhouse growers, and they've partnered with us for many years so that we can get exactly what we want. So for instance, the geraniums are growing in a different potting mix than everything else because they need a little bit of extra lime. And they do that for us, especially with their huge mixers. And Crystal can fill us in on a lot of the liquid feed that we do.
Yep, so actually incorporated into our soil, we do get a small amount of the slow release, so that's available for about 3 months. And then we do also put another slow release in there because we sometimes get a lot of rain and then we can't feed with our liquid fertilizers as much. And then for our liquid fertilizers, I'm sure you guys are all familiar with fertilizers like Miracle-Gro or Jax or Proven Winners fertilizer. It's very similar to that. But what we do is we actually split our crops into 2 different groups so we can give them the best fertilizers that they need. And our wonderful interns monitor those nutrients for us in the soil weekly, actually. And then they text me a picture and say, what do you think we need? So it's a lot of science, but it's a lot of fun. And we try not to kill anything.
So what do you do with any of the ones that happen to die, or just at the end of the season, what do you do with the ones that are still alive?
So this is a common question, and mostly it leads to people saying, can I have them? And sometimes we do partner with like Mannheim Farm Show, usually needs some flowers right around the time we're getting rid of them. But all of these flowers, for the majority, the most part, are going to be annual flowers. And so we run an entire season, and Sinclair rates them 4 times. So by the time he's done rating them, it's middle of September. And then by October, we're starting to look at our first frost, and these will all die anyway. So we compost them here on site, except for the perennials that we can winter over. And then any of the volunteers who help us throughout the season, we usually give them first dibs on any plants that can survive that they would like to take home with them.
Very cool. Very cool. So how long do you study a plant or a variety, especially ones that are perennials?
Ooh, you want to take this, Sinclair?
What we do with the perennials is they're in ground for 3 winters. So we plant them up hopefully early in the season, usually it's June sometime. And they go through 3 successive winters and are evaluated on their performance and also their hardiness. And at that point, they're dug up and extracted because we need to make the beds ready for the next crop that's coming in. This year we had more entries than usual because we were going to have the Perennial Plant Association conference right here in Lancaster. Of course, like so many events, it was canceled or actually postponed till next year. So we're hopeful that, you know, those 400 or 500 perennial people from all over the U.S. will be with us next year. And if a plant doesn't make it through the first winter, that's it. It's not replaced in kind. We just leave it alone. And as I tell visitors, if you don't see a plant where this label is, that's because it died.
And that's important information, right?
Yes, we actually, hardiness is a complicated business, and it's not a yes/no question because we have open winters. We don't have snow cover that's up to your knees going through all the winter months. And as a result, we get freeze-thaw events. So the plant begins to grow when it gets over 40, 45 degrees Fahrenheit. And then as the temperature goes back down again, that bud is frozen. So several cycles successively of the freeze and thaw can kill a plant. And it depends on the plant's genetics, but it also depends on how it's grown. So we try to keep our water and nutrients up to speed and keep everything on par in that respect. Well-fed plants do better than plants that have been starved to death over the season. And so there's, as I say, it's a complicated business. It's actually easier to do hardiness studies in Vermont because they have the snow cover and the protection up there. Yes, it goes down below 0 frequently, but that may not be such a big problem if you've got snow cover protecting the plants.
That's very interesting. Do you make the weather and precipitation data part of the performance data? Like if there's any unseasonable differences that's out of the norm?
Well, we'll put written comments in the reports on that basis. And I remember, I guess it was 2014. We were in the first week of January and it was really balmy. It was 50 some degrees. And then the next week it dropped down to 6. So there was one of those dramatic temperature changes, which certainly had an impact on what we were doing here.
Very cool. We do have a couple requests to see the perennials. And also, in your opinions, based on the ratings, are there any like really good showy varieties for Pennsylvania that stick out?
Yes, we have some real stars. And we have since 14 when we started doing this. One that we just extracted was American Gold Rush Rudbeckia, and that plant gets really a minimum of foliar problems in the fall. If you grow Rudbeckia Goldstrom or Fulgida variety, you may see late summer and fall fungi affecting the foliage. And with American Gold Rush, nothing was on the plant at all in 3 years. So a really great performer. We also have some really showy hibiscus from Texas that are in the program this year. Actually, they were planted last year. And one of them has a huge flower. We can go take a look at that. And then there are companies that ask us to trial the perennials in the container trials. And that may be because they already know it's hardy or they don't want anybody else to know it's not hardy. So there could be several reasons for that. Or it might just be a monetary decision because we charge $120 for a 3-year study plant and $70 for a container for 1 year.
So right now we're walking past the annuals, which are in containers here. And you would have seen some Rudbeckia that Sinclair was talking about. We are actually right here looking at some of the perennials that we took out this year. Their class is over and it has graduated. So these are going to some new homes.
There's that American Gold Rush. And these were dug up a little bit less than perfect, but my boss wanted a couple of these for his house. I said, okay, we'll save this for you. So you're lucky we have some to show.
Got to keep the bosses happy.
And usually what we're planting is on the order of 70 to 80 varieties a year in ground. This year we were over 88. So that made me real happy. But it's also growing the interest and awareness of the perennial program as part of the Penn State Flower Trials, which has resulted in a lot of interest locally. We have a lot of very good growers and experts in the 3-state area, Delaware, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. There's some in New Jersey too. We won't slight New Jersey. But we'll hear some of the varieties that we planted out this year. And let me just show you this hibiscus flower. You won't believe it. This is a nice pink variety. But look at the size of this one. Bigger than my hands can reach across it. And as they say, everything's better in Texas or bigger in Texas. Well, this is from a Texas breeder, J. Berry Nursery. And this is what we planted this year. So we did 3 beds, each containing 24, and then the piece of the 4th bed, which took us up over 88. So they're just starting out. They don't look like they've been growing here for years and years. And downslope, you can see the plants that were put in 2 years ago and 3 years ago.
Okay.
We had one. Do you do any special trials for native species?
Not particularly. If we have a number of native plants in the program, you come over here. We have 2 grasses from the Midwest and These are the species of plant. This is a Budaloa, which is sometimes called Cytos gramagrass. And that's because the raceme, the flower is all on one side of the spike. And these were entered by Intrinsic Perennial Gardens from Illinois. And he's a real good breeder. There's one of his Rudbeckias. I mentioned Gold Rush. This is another one that's bigger. It's called Glitters Like Gold. It's almost a 4-foot plant. But again, a really nice resistance for diseases in the fall and late summer. And I think it's a highly productive item. Here's another one. This is Pennicetum. Love and Rockets is the name that they put on this one. Okay. Sometimes this nomenclature gets a little bit far-fetched. We have some names that you can hardly fit on a label, they're so long, including the trademark and the a series name and so forth. But let's look at some of the Echinaceas. I'll put this in for a minute. And again, these are first year installations. We've got these big guys planted in June. Lovely array of tall Coreopsis from Duman. We'll see how hardy they are. Many Coreopsis have not made it through the winter. So this white one is from Terra Nova, an Oregon company, but these other ones are from Pan American Seed, which is part of the Ball Corporation, Ball Horticulture, and they are probably our biggest participant in this program. Ball does over 25% of the entries, both in the containers and out here in the field.
Wow, that's very cool. Do you use any landscape fabric or weed barrier under the planted perennial beds?
Does that answer your question?
I don't know how well they can see it. Can you guys see that?
This is a woven plastic material that we put down, then we burn a hole for the plant. So we have an annealed edge and it's not fraying. And then we put the mulch on top of it. And the mulch lowers that fabric temperature significantly. Perennials, as a rule, like to have a cooler root system than a lot of the annual hybrids. We got plants coming from Israel that are extremely heat tolerant. Maybe Alyssa will show a couple of the Danziger items out there. And those are really able to take the heat. A lot of the perennials are really much happier with a 60 to 70 degree root temperature maximum. So you get into 90 degrees, this fabric will heat up over 140 degrees where it's exposed to the sun. And that's just too hot. So we put the mulch on top.
You'll see we also have irrigation here, and those lines between the plants are irrigation lines. They're not run real regularly in the perennials like they would be in the annuals, but it gives us the opportunity that if we do have a drought, we can give them a shot of water and make sure they're getting enough to stay alive.
Yeah, that's a very important aspect. And Alyssa's not telling you that staff works really hard to keep all these irrigation systems on the farm working and functional. It's a big deal. But if you're a plant and you don't get water for 4 weeks, you're in trouble. And so this mitigates that issue.
Very nice system to keep everything up. Are there any special protocols if you are bringing plants in from other countries?
Generally, they don't come from other countries directly. What would be standard if, say, you're Beacon Camp, which is one of our big contributors from the Netherlands. If they have, and they've entered, oh my goodness, over 30 begonias this year, just in that group. So what they'll do is they'll contract a US-based rooting station and they'll send cuttings. Or if it's seed, they'll send seed. But a lot of the plants we grow are vegetatively reproduced. So they send cuttings from one of their cutting suppliers. It could come from Costa Rica. It could come from Europe. It could come from Africa. You never know. And they'll go to a rooting station like Grow and Sell over in Chalfont, Pennsylvania, was one of our big suppliers. And we also use Rakers, Roberta Rakers in Michigan, and Gully out in Colorado. So there are a lot of places where they could come from. Most of these companies are global enterprises. So they're not just located and selling in one area. They're trying to pave the world with their plants. So you take a company like Doom and Orange, headquarters is in Germany. We work with an offshoot branch of that in Ohio, and Cicada Seed America, another firm from Japan, has a branch out in California. So a lot of the material comes to us from stateside production companies or propagation companies. But see, when it's really hot, these masks don't stay where they're supposed to. But seriously, a lot of the production comes to us from overseas through a very convoluted pathway.
That makes sense. What, kind of going back, what kind of insect activity do you tend to get, and how does it affect the trials?
Well, we battle a lot of things out here. We try to be soft in our chemical use, but that doesn't always work. And just as Longwood Gardens would tell you, if we're pushed to the wall, we'll bring out the heavy artillery. And that's just, we can't let the plants go completely downhill because people are coming to see, well, in a normal year, they're coming to see their performance, and we'll have some representatives from some companies come 3, 4, 5 times a season just to see early, mid, and late season performance.
You want to talk a little bit about the beneficials you've
Yes, we
cultivated?
also have brought in some beneficials. Back in 2014, I purchased a load of pirate bugs, which is a minute little thing. You almost don't recognize it, but they are pirates. They do bite you. They also are excellent at thrips control and aphid control if the aphids are small. So we brought those in, and we've never had to repurchase them. They just continue to show up year after year in this program. And they're out here for the nectar initially and pollen. And some of the pollen, especially from some ornamental pepper species, will actually increase their reproductive ability. So let's say if a pyramid is laying 10 eggs and they feed upon the right ornamental pepper, they can wind up laying 15 to 20 eggs. And that's a huge difference when you multiply it across the territory. One year, it was 2018, we had an awful rain situation. We were about 30 inches over average. That's a lot of water. It's like almost 4 feet. And well, it's more than that. Well, no, not quite. But anyway, it was very hard to get spray equipment into the field because of the consistent and downpour volume of the rain. So what we did was we bought some predatory mites and released them in the Calibrachoa crop, which enabled us to control those thrips very well.
So I just wanted to walk you towards the Coreopsis while we talk about insects. We've got a lot of butterflies and other pollinators that love to hang out here. And you can definitely see they have their preferred plants. You know, they love the salvia. We've got a little hummingbird flock here too, and they really like the salvia and the agastache and a few other things. But there's a lot of things for, you know, pollinator insects to feed on out here, and there's a lot of variety. So we feel pretty good about that. There's also a group of apiculture folks who keep some beehives, some honey beehives over by our pole barn. And so the honeybees benefit from being right next to the flower trials too.
Yes, and there are thousands of syrphid flies or hoverflies out here, which is a very excellent, and again, these are something we didn't buy, they just naturally occurred here, probably ever since the flowers came to this location. They're out for nectar, but they lay eggs that hatch into maggots, and the maggots are extremely efficient at killing aphids. And so I would gather that close to 80% of our aphid control is done naturally here.
That's impressive. We have a question. If you do have to spray something with a pesticide, do they get marked with a flag or anything?
Well, we'll put up a warning sign on the experimental plot. So if we spray the containers, we'll put up a sign that says, this has been treated, your reentry interval is listed, and so then folks know when they can come back into the program. We try to do that when nobody's here. So we'll do it at the end of the day. Most of the products that we're using have a 12-hour or less reentry interval. And so by morning, it's safe to go back into the program.
One of the things that's important to us out here is that we don't give preferential treatment to any one plant or any one company's plants. And so if something needs to be sprayed, it's usually because, you know, if it's a petunia, it's because all the petunias are being affected by that problem. And so the whole group of petunias gets sprayed, because it's important to know if any one company's flowers are more susceptible or less resilient to any of these pressures, disease pressure or insect pressure.
Yes, it's like the musketeers, all for one and one for all. If we treat a coreopsis, we're going to treat all the coreopsis. And as Alyssa said, in the petunias, we frequently have to deal with Alternaria fungus, which comes out right about now and starts to mar the foliage. And so we're on a application basis, we would apply a fungicide 7 to 10 day intervals just to control that issue. And you might want to know which petunias are better in respect to Alternaria. Supertunias from Proven Winners, very good. Blanket series from Green Fused Botanicals, also very good. And the Decos from Syngenta. All those variety or series names have shown a good resistance to the Alternaria.
Very good. We do actually have a request to see some new petunia varieties and companion plants for hanging baskets.
Okay, we'll head to the petunias now.
We do have a question. Are the varieties planted pure lines or hybrids? And do you do any seed collection?
We don't really do any seed collection. Part of our agreement with the companies entering plants is that we're not going to capitalize on their intellectual property. So what we'll do in the case of seed set, we'll ignore it. This whole row is petunias. We've got about 113 cultivars in the program this year. Here's another really good line. This is from Cicada and Cicada Seed America, a Japanese firm with a California branch. And these are actually labeled Pachoa because they're hybrids between Calibrachoa and Petunia. And these are really good spreading plants. They don't create a tight little ball, but they can cover ground in the landscape, and really strong bloomers. I think we've had these for 5 years, not the same cultivars. Every year they send us a different array. Last year there were fall colors. There were things that you might think about using on a Halloween or Thanksgiving event from the color scheme. But all of these Pachoas, and there's 6 of them here, or 5 of them, that's Opera Supreme. This is a very good series of plants, and in my opinion, one of the best things you could put in a landscape. Here's a brand new one from Ball. This is called Bee's Knees. And the Ball folks are real proud of it, and they should be. It's a strong yellow. It's also a very good performer. Here it is, almost the first week of August. Some of these petunias start to go downhill. This one here's not doing as well as it might, but Bee's Knees is just really growing and blooming its head off. Another good series from Ball is the Color Rush. Here's Color Rush Blue. It's not really blue, it's purple, but that's all right. And Color Rush Pink. And this, I think, rivals Supertunia Vista Bubblegum, which is absolutely the most widely sold petunia in Lancaster County. Here's another good performer, this Color Rush Pink Vein. It's got this lovely habit to the petals where you've got lines of darker color streaking out from the center. Really a pretty plant, but also a very good bloomer. And when we put a plant out that's new, it should say that on the label. This is one, Easy Wave Rose Fusion. Not blooming as well as it might, but it's a new variety and it's listed as such on the label. That's from Pan American Seed. And also, if the plant is grown by seed, it's labeled as such on the tag. So visitors can know, hey, I can get seed for this. These 2 are vegetative. I'll have to get cuttings. And that's what they're out here to see. They want to see who's doing well And what they're going to do for next year is the decision they're trying to make. What do we grow? Do we grow the same stuff we grew this year, or do we want to infuse some new lines into the program? This is the T series from Beacon Camp. It's okay, but here's one from Benari that I've liked a lot this year, this Rose Star. In their series, they call it a success series. So,
Do you want to tell us a little bit about the flower damage that we see this time of year?
yeah, you get, this is rain damage for the most part here, but you also could see some spotting on there, which could be a fungal disease. And so we applied a fungicide last week, and we have one on the schedule to do again this week. So sometimes it's rain damage, and you get these sort of clumpy bits. If the plant is really good at dropping its flowers, we call that a self-cleaning variety, like this one back here. Success Blue is doing much better in terms of losing those spent flowers. The flowers don't last too long, a couple of days, and then it's time for them to fall off. And if they do that, that's a really good advantage for a grower and for landscape people. Here's one from Danzinger. So this is going to be extremely heat tolerant because everything they send us is from Israel. And of course, they're in a desert. So that's doing really well. Here's one that's not doing so well, not from Danzinger. But the same company has this really good hot pink Durabloom. And there's the Durabloom purple behind it. Good at self-cleaning. No real spots or flecks on the flowers to speak of. And the foliage looks really good.
So who does the ratings, and like, do you use a checklist based on the data that we saw? What do you look for?
Well, I do the ratings, and we like one person to do all the rating data. So if I got struck by lightning, that would mess the year up, because somebody else would have to step in and finish the ratings. But we rate the plants on a very objective system. It's not it's not at all wavered by opinion. I love purple, but that doesn't come into it. The question is it uniform? What does how much flower power does the plant have? And does the foliage look good? And so we 5, and if it's 1, it's mostly dead. If it's 5, it's a plant of superior quality and performance. So if you look behind Alyssa right there, you'll see several of the Angelonia varieties, and you could sort of guess where we are. This pink one in the center is going to get a pretty good mark for flowering. It's very uniform, whereas the white one on the right side of it is not so uniform in habit. So we might give that a 3, maybe a 4 if I'm feeling very generous, but that's probably a 3 to 3.5 in habit, whereas the pink one's going to get a 4 to 5. And as you do that over 4 ratings and you average those numbers, we come up with a final score. If the plant performed overall 4 or 5 or better, it's in the top percentage of the program.
Very cool, very good, very nice. We have one, this is more of like an opinion, I guess. How do you think can we encourage our administrations to see the value in, say, a high school horticulture program?
It's a huge industry. It's worth billions of dollars across the country and millions in Pennsylvania. And that's just the plant side of it. There are also hard goods such as potting soil, fertilizer, consulting services, plant and soil tissue testing, all kinds of things that fall into that hopper, and then landscaping. And when you talk about our industry at floriculture, we're really worried about having enough new young people coming into the field. In fact, there's been a program established by a lot of entities that have banded together called Seed Your Future. And it's a marketing tactic to show people, especially young people in middle school and high school, that there's a lot to this. It's not just mowing grass and raking leaves. I mean, a plant breeder is drawing down maybe 6 figures in pay. Good salesman also has 6-figure salaries. So there's a lot of revenue in there, and it's not just, and look where you get to be. You're out here in the wonderful wilds, in the great outdoors. You're not stuck in a cubicle sitting behind a desk or something. So there are reasons to do this. And it's also a pretty healthy lifestyle. Folks who work in this industry work physically hard, and they also have really good physiques, most of them, and they have pretty long lives. So it's worth considering as a career path. But you know, you bring out several of these varieties and you patent them, why the intellectual property might be worth six figures as well. I have a colleague over in Europe who developed some really stellar Echinaceas about 15 years ago. And he took home a royalty check from that company for $260,000 for 1 year.
But wear sunscreen. You
Yeah.
must wear sunscreen.
Definitely important.
Look at banana. This is a deco variety. And this is also a deco. Most of these are in this sector. But this thing has just bloomed and bloomed and bloomed. Now, I like the bee's knees yellow a little bit better from a color point of view. But as I say, we don't rate on color. And this particular performer, excuse me, is doing very, very well, as are some of the other decos. And they'll continue that performance up through early October, unless we toss them away.
Should we point out a few of the hanging basket combo types?
Certainly.
And as we're walking, we have another question of what sort of resources do you have or would recommend to an elementary school teacher?
Well, a good resource would be our webpage.
Sorry.
We maintain all this data online, and we put it up there for people to use. They don't all have to be industry folks. They could be hobbyists, gardeners, school systems, what have you. And that will enable you to see who's doing really well. And we maintain 3 years of data on there. So you can look back and say, oh, 2018, that was the year we washed out. What did really well then?
You know, the other thing that I've thought of for elementary school is when you're starting a math curriculum that's working with things like graphing and graphical representations of data, the Flower Trials database is a really good place to get interesting data. So in like 2018, you can find out how many petunias we had. And then you can also know that for 2019 and 2020, you can graph that and see, did it go up? Did it go down? There's all sorts of ways you can use that data that's, that can be geared toward different grade levels.
Yeah, another thing that could be interesting is climate and geography, as Penn State is one of 24 entities that feeds data into the National Trials database, which is housed down in Georgia, at the University of Georgia. And you can look across the country and see how this particular variety did in Minnesota versus Texas versus Pennsylvania, et cetera, et cetera. And so that could open up a discussion on geography and climate. And the other thing that everybody who's in this field breeding and developing new plants is concerned with is climate change. Because more rainfall, that's going to impact your petunias and calibrachoas. More heat, that's going to take plants that grew nicely for your grandmother, and maybe they'll pout because it's too hot for them now. So breeders are challenged to take these plants forward with the change in climate, which is a really great science discussion. How do you do that? What do you do for that? You know, I have about 15 plant patents personally, and one of the things we were looking at is how can we make foam flower, the native Tiarella, more heat tolerant? And we figured out a way to look at the plant and determine what was physically obvious as a characteristic that will lead to greater heat tolerance.
So what's your favorite combo here this year?
There's a lot of them. These are beach series from Syngenta are all good. They have beach bound, beach bum, etc. And then as I love purples, this is a great one too. This is the crushed velvet mix, and that's an apt name. And it's got a calibrachoa in here, and a petunia, and a verbena. And usually what happens with mixed combos, it's an art to put these together because oftentimes one of the plants will beat up the other two by the time we get to August 15, August 20. But these are doing really well, and all components are participating. There's another really good one down here on the end. This is called Line Down. It's a little tongue-in-cheek names, but it's better than Mom's Chosen One as a name choice, because I would tell people, well, that was my brother. But anyway, this is a really good combination. Again, a Calibrachoa small flowered petunia and this lovely purple and white verbena.
So when you're mixing plants at home on your own, you might hit it big and get some that combine really well. But then these breeders have worked for years to make sure that the combo they sell you works well together.
And here's another line of plants. This is from Doom and Orange, one of our big companies participating in the program. These are perennials. And these Coreopsis, same varieties, some that we saw down in the field there, are doing really well. And look at the bud count. This is going to go and go. Idea. Critical a bit about the salvia, but if you're a homeowner, you could just pinch off these spent stems and new flowers would come out. We're not going to do that, because if we do that on this pot, then we've got to do that on all the pots, and we only do deadheading a couple times a year.
Very good. We're almost out of time. Do any of you have any final thoughts you want to wrap up with?
Well, if folks are interested in beneficial insects, in pollinator species, the best way to attract them to your backyard is to grow a lot of flowers. And so, as I often say at the end of a program I'm delivering for master gardeners or for industry, keep growing those flowers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh.
Thank you guys so much for joining us out here. Like I said, in the future, we hope you can come out here in person. But in the meantime, make sure you keep up to date on what we're doing through Extension. That's how all of the information that we gather here at this trial and a lot of other trials gets out to people, growers, farmers, everyone. We push that out through events like this, through programming in the winter, and we want to make sure that the people who can use it can get it.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you everyone for attending too. And just so everyone knows, we will be sending out a resource sheet for everyone tomorrow in an email. So be sure to look for the resources that Alyssa mentioned to use in your classroom. All right, and don't forget to do your post-test too, please. We will post that in 1 second. All right, thank you, Alyssa.
Thank you guys, and thank you all teachers everywhere always. We love you.
Thank you.